Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm going to talk about something that's honestly been bothering me. It's something I don't talk about a whole lot or talk about directly unless I'm being asked. And that's just because I feel like my opinion might differ from a lot of people. It's also a super controversial subject a lot of the time, so I tend to stray away. But it's been really, really eating at me these last few days, particularly with the Act 6.4 rewards announcements and really just understanding how warped Marvel Contest of Champions is depending on where you are perspective-wise. And what that is free-to-play, pay to play, and pay to win. It is three, Marvel Contest of Champions is three completely different games depending on which perspective you're playing from. And it's so much more complicated than a simple pay-to-play players are cutting edge, they're all at the end game, and free-to-play players, they can't keep up. Because free-to-play players can keep up. There are many free-to-play players who are keeping up. It's difficult, and some of them have been playing for many years. They have that time investment, or they're just grinding crazy hard, and maybe they're lagging a little bit behind, in the form of 6-star rank 3s, but content-wise, they're at the end, they're in high-tier alliances, they're pushing higher maps and alliance quest. It's still possible to keep up, a step behind, but keep up. Right now that gap is widening, but that's because we're in this awkward transition from 5 stars to a 6-star meta. We're not quite there yet is the argument Kabam wants to make. I kind of agree. It just really depends on, again, which perspective you're playing from, because really, everybody's going to be playing a different game depending on how much money you spend on this game. Because, free-to-play players definitely not in a 6-star meta yet. Free-to-play players are still in a 5-star meta. But pay-to-play players and even pay-to-win players are solidly in 6-star meta, if not pushing towards a 6-star meta very soon. And that makes the game very, very challenging to balance. So a little bit of perspective, just so you know where my bias stands, is I have not been a free-to-play player since I was 16. When I was 16, I think 15 actually, because that's when I started mowing lawns for money. I've played online games since I was 12, and as soon as I had any relative source of income, I was a pay-to-play player. Never a pay-to-win player. I don't really enjoy pay-to-win games. Marvel kind of has a pay-to-win aspect, but to me, it's too much of a single-player game to be considered pay-to-win. There's definitely parts of the game that are locked, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But when I mean pay-to-play, I mean League of Legends. I used to buy skins. There is zero competitive advantage in League of Legends for buying skins, but dude, it's just they look awesome, and I love the game, and that's my hobby, and that's where I spent my money on. I was going to work, saving up for college, paying for my car, paying for my laptop. I was working 2 jobs when I was in high school at one point. And part of my income went to games because that was my hobby. That's what I enjoyed, and I never felt ashamed or embarrassed by it. And all my friends even would make fun of me, "Oh, you bought another skin?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I made $600 this week, and I'm in high school, so F off." So I can afford to drop $60 on League of Legends, as a high school kid. And that methodology, that logic has followed me all the way to where I am now. It's not so much about how much money you're spending on the game, so much as how effective it is on your day-to-day life. If you're spending within your means, you're only spending enough on the game that you enjoy. You're never overspending to a point where you're hey, I really regretted that decision. And you're not spending money that you'll regret. I don't see anything wrong with spending on a game, even if it's pay to win. I don't think Marvel Contest of Champions is pay to win, but even if it is pay to win, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're enjoying it and it's within your means. When you go to the point where you're no longer enjoying it and you're just raging at the game because you're spending money, or you're living beyond your means, you're eating instant ramen every single day because you can't afford to buy food, that's when, you start to get my ire, you start to get my judgment. But as long as you're not at that point, I don't see anything wrong with it. Absolutely love it. Enjoy the game to whatever extent you can. And if you're full free to play because spending money on a mobile video game is makes you cringe, and the thought of even putting any kind of money on a game like this makes you cringe, power power to you. Play the game, and I hope you get the most out of it, and I hope you thoroughly enjoy it, because there's a large community of free-to-play players here as well. And that's really the point I want to drive home before I go into like the 3 different perspectives of this game, or kind of my take on them at least, because I really want to drive home the point that like you as a player, us as a player, me as a player, we really need to emphasize perspective, right? And look at the game through our lens, but recognize that there are other lenses that exist out there. By focusing on that perspective, we can have a different kind of appreciation for the game and then stick to that logic and that methodology. So when I say free to play, I mean $0 a month. When I say pay to play, I mean anywhere from $5 to $200 a month. Maybe you're only buying the unit deal, maybe you're only buying the summoner sigil, but a little bit of money still makes a huge difference in Marvel Contest of Champions. And when I say pay to win, I mean people who are dropping over $200 a month. These are the people who are dropping, buying every single set of featured calves. They're buying calves just on the regular, just in general. These are the people who pick up every single deal. These are, your pay to win players. Not that it's pay to win to begin with, but that's its own thing. So those are like the 3 brackets I have, and I've kind of taken it and I've looked at the game from like different lenses. So for a free-to-play player, when we talk about content, new content comes. Act 6.4, Abyss of Legends. Free-to-play players are usually, they look at that content and they evaluate it. They're still in the same boat as everybody else. It's new content. They're excited to jump in. But a lot of times, free-to-play players, they sit down and they say, I'm not going to touch that for a couple months. I've got to figure out my roster, set it up so I could go in there and it's, relatively effective. Maybe I need to rank up specific people or hold off. Sometimes these are people like who've grinded and prepared and are able to push like a Legends run or something. But even then, it's much harder for a free-to-play player to push a Legends run than it is for like a pay-to-play or a pay-to-win player, just because like the availability of boosts, the availability of resources, and oftentimes if a free-to-player wants to make a Legends run, it is a conscious and long-term saved plan. Like you can't just willy-nilly say, I want to do a Legends run. You have to have actively saved hundreds to thousands of units and boosts and resources to do so, because you need to be able to like really keep up with everybody in the game. And on top of that, it's like roster selection, because you could be one of the best champions, one of the best players in the game, and just not have the right pool of champions to make a Legends run, and that's really unfortunate, but that's just a reality. So there's a lot that happens there content wise, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be able to do it. There's still a really large amount of units that can be grinded in this game. Arena is the great equalizer. Doesn't matter what perspective you're playing from. The arena is, it's equal to everybody, because you can't replace time. Yeah, you can boost up and unit up and just keep, refreshing your 6-star roster. But honestly, a free-to-play player can do that too, as long as they're selective about it. Yeah, they don't get to do it as often, but they can do it if they're fishing for a specific champion. But honestly, even like pay-to-win players, they can't be doing that every single day. And they still have to do the fights, excluding botting. But honestly, if you're botting, you're going to get banned eventually anyways. So, hopefully you get banned eventually anyways, because that's a very unfair advantage. That's my perspective on that. But as long as these are actual people playing, nothing makes up for time. You have to put the time in, and Arena is a great equalizer in that regard, but there's like a huge amount of units in the Arena, and that really makes the reason for why free-to-play players can keep up in the first place is that active resource gain that is just available to everybody, and everybody needs to go in and get that unless you're like hardcore space whale on the game. For Alliance War, for a free-to-play player, this is where I think like we start to see immediate notices. So I think that for a lot of free-to-play players, there's a roster restriction on Alliance War, not so much on attack. Like maybe you won't have the perfect champion to attack with, or you're setting up like 1 or 2 teams and the occasional counter here or there. I think the biggest notice I see on a free-to-play roster is defense restrictions. A lot of times it's much harder for a free-to-play player to push a defense-based rank up, and that's honestly hard for me to convince a free-to-play player to do it, because like if you do a defense-based rank up, are you losing a content rank up, a variant rank up? Where are those resources coming from? They don't come as often on a free-to-play basis. Yeah, it still happens. There are tons of cutting edge or top end players who are investing in defense rank ups. It's just slower and it's much more painful, I gotta say. So it's all about like maximizing the input there for Alliance War. I'm just saying, generally speaking, I see less defense rank ups from a free to play player. And again, I'm not, I know I'm generalizing, so be kind to me in that regard. I'm just pointing out the differences. For Alliance Quest, Map 5 is fairly friendly to all players as long as you grind a bit of arena. You have like a relatively well thought out roster. Map 5, I found, even free-to-play players can push that no problem. It's Map 6 that starts to draw roster availability, and Map 7 that feels restrictive to free-to-play players. Like, yeah, you can do it depending on, like, RNG, whether or not you're able to get the paths you're looking for. It might require, like, more coordination because you might be able to only handle a couple certain paths in, like, Map 6 or Map 7, but you can still definitely do it. Both of these maps are still, like, accessible to free-to-play players. Donations hurt, and they hurt free-to-play players the most because it's strictly grind based on the donations. But Map 6 and Map 7, they're still doable from a roster perspective. Honestly, I feel like for Alliance Quest, while it might hurt for certain paths, or you might need to coordinate with your officers to make sure you get certain paths because of roster restrictions. I think the biggest restriction on Alliance Quest for free-to-play players is prestige. Like, as I was looking to like upgrade to a Map 6/Map 7 Alliance, the biggest drawback I found was prestige. Like, I had so many alliances, they were like, yeah, your roster's defined, yeah, you've got the skills, but your prestige is too low. And honestly, 5-star 6 stones aren't like super readily accessible in the game for free-to-play players, so it's just so much harder to keep up with the prestige race, and then that ends up locking you out of a lot of alliances, and you might find yourself in a Map 5 alliance just strictly due to not being able to have the prestige for a higher tiered alliance. And that's just a reality, and that's frustrating, but hopefully that shores up as we start balancing up and catching up, during this 5/6-star transition phase. After that, I think the next noticeable point is masteries. For a lot of free-to-play players, until you've properly saved up or played the game long enough to go around unlocking all the masteries the long way, these are really, really selective. And in free-to-play players, the most I see one mastery setup, and that's it. And it's not a question of optimizing or going this way. It's straight up, these are the masteries I chose. I put a lot of hard thought and pre-thought into this mastery setup, and I don't change it ever. This is my mastery setup, period. And then occasionally they'll if they're a suicide runner, they'll turn suicides off and they'll have maybe a slightly alternative one, but it's usually a budget build, just because masteries are expensive. And yeah, if you've played the game long enough, you'll have them all unlocked eventually anyways, but honestly, even $20 on the mastery deals makes a huge difference in the ability to unlock masteries, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. I seeing how long it takes to unlock masteries with only units. It really makes me feel like Kabam needs to make them more accessible. And this is one of my biggest pain points because masteries are so core to how well your roster performs in content. And even in many situations, specific masteries completely alter a way a fight mechanic triggers. For example, aggression regeneration can be completely memed with a 2-star Captain America Infinity War and a tech champion. But if you don't have the units to dump into despair, / you didn't prioritize the units to dump into despair, you can't do that. Now you have to approach that concept from a completely different standpoint, and it's 10 times harder when you can't just meme it. And that was one of the common problems we had in the community boss rush challenge too, where a lot of free-to-play players were I can't just jump in with a Captain Infinity War against that Domino. I don't have despair unlocked, which means I need to bring a proper heal block, and then I have to worry about unlucky, and that Domino just became a huge pain. Yeah, which is a frustration in its own, and it was supposed to be a free fight, because if you just bring heal reversal, it's a free fight. You just stall out for 20 to 30 seconds, throw a couple parries on the Domino, and she's dead. But, strictly speaking, if you don't have despair, you're SOL. So yeah, masteries I think is probably one of my biggest pain points, and that brings me next to prestige. So there's a good amount of 5-star 6 stones if you spend a bit of money on the game, but if you're spending $0, 5-star 6 stones are one of those still the rarest rank up resources in the game. Like tier 2 alphas are catching up, tier 5 basics are catching up. It just depends on how hard you're pushing an alliance quest, how hard you're pushing an alliance war. But 5-star 6 stones, those are not regularly in the game. You get like 10 a month from the uncollected difficulty, and then honestly you're lucky if Kabam throws them in the monthly. So prestige, it's just not feasible. Like if you want to bring up a champion who requires high sig but doesn't have a high prestige, like Captain America Infinity War or Void, your prestige just takes a huge hit. And in order to keep up with like the top prestige races, you need to bring up champions with high prestige, and that regard, you need to be blessed with like a Captain Marvel movie or a Thing, or one of the champions who's just like really, really wants their awakened ability anyways, and having it high sig doesn't feel terrible. But honestly, most times for a free-to-play player, my advice is just say screw the prestige and, don't try to keep up with the race. It's not worth the effort. You're better off just recognizing like that's not a part of the game you need to keep up with. Just play within your means and don't worry about the race, because in the long run, the prestige race is going to stress you out the most as a free-to-play player. And that's an unfortunate reality, but I think the sooner you recognize that, the more at peace and the more you might be able to enjoy the game. And, that's coming from a pay-to-play player, so if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I'd love to have information from free-to-play players, but that's my perspective, and that's just what I see. Like, 5-star 6-stone deals are one of the most valuable things to me as a pay-to-play player. Like, I don't buy tier 2 alpha, I don't buy tier 5 basic, but you better believe I buy 5-star 6-stones, because they're just so inaccessible in the game. And honestly, it's one of the things I think Kabam really needs to fix. So yeah, perspective-wise, free-to-play, I think masteries and 5-star 6 stones are like the two things really, really, really holding free-to-play players back. Because if you can fix those two things, free-to-play players can handle the rest. And then finally, after prestige is rosters. So rosters, for a free-to-play player, 4 stars retain their value for so much longer, because it's like awakened abilities and signature level on a 4-star is like relatively accessible in the game, as long as you micromanage like the daily objectives, the weekly objectives, and all that jazz. Granted, that's going to be subject to change as we're seeing updates to that pretty soon. But like 4-star 6 stones are relatively accessible. 4-star awakening gems are relatively accessible once you're pushing higher end content. So you can bring up 4 stars for specific utility like Void or Captain America Infinity War High Sig, as long as you're meeting the other requirements like masteries. Or maybe you need some like Warlock for anti-heal, or Hulk Ragnarok for variant 2. Like, these are options for you, but it's when you start pushing into the 5-star roster that I feel like free-to-play players have like a much, much stronger appreciation for mid-tier champions. Like, when people talk about underrated champions or champions that should be, are rank 5-able but like are definitely solid mid-tier, oftentimes I think these are free-to-play players or low pay-to-play players, honestly. Just because like when your roster isn't as diverse, you start looking at less of the high tier options and more of the mid tier options. You start seeing like the quote unquote high demigod / low god tier champions being ranked up, because they're still amazing champions. They're just not, the Warlock or the Doctor Doom. It might just be, hey, Magic is a power control goddess. She's so good. And then it's just like, well, are you comparing her to Doom, or are you comparing her to other power control options like Dormammu, who hits like a twig? But I feel like free-to-play players, they get to appreciate a larger pool of champions in the game, and that's like actually a really cool aspect, because for them, champion pulls are less frequent. They're typically not pulling Cavalier crystals, so for them it's like, a lot of the like mid-tier champions, which are often overlooked by people who spend a lot of money on the game or open like a lot of Cavaliers. These champions like can be very, very hyped, or should be very, very hyped, because of their utility and their ability to handle content. But also roster-wise, this also means champions who require like max signature or champions who require high sig are often scrutinized and not even like invested resources in until like they absolutely can be invested in. Like Namor, like I don't see Namor ever being a free-to-play player hype champion, because you just have to have him max sig 200, and it just draws the question of like, is that where you put 206 stones, or do you invest them somewhere else? And that's why like I personally don't hype Namor for most people, because like Do you have the resources? If not, he's not a great champion. If you have the resources, he's one of the best champions in the game for sure. Awesome value. You got to get him to SIG 200 first. Captain America Infinity War as a 5-star, amazing champion. Do you have 86 stones to dump into him? Maybe you wait to bring him up to rank 4 until you do. Void, same logic. Omega Red, these champions who require high SIG to like really keep up, they end up getting benched for a long time and then ranked up eventually. But, that hype isn't on pull, it's on 6 stones. And that comes with time. So that said, that's the end of the free-to-play player bit. I'm going to move into pay-to-play. So pay-to-play, when I talk about here, I'm talking anyone who spends somewhere between like $100 to $200 a month, or maybe you're one of those people who only whales on like the July 4th and the Cyber Monday deals and like occasionally buys the Summoner Sigil or the $5 unit deal. Like even the $5 unit deal, like only spending $5 on the unit deal, that's like 735 extra units a month. It's a sizable amount. I mean, that's a carb core and carb core and a half there. But pay-to-play players, essentially, they're just less subject to RNG because they're essentially having more rank ups, more champions, just a general larger variety in the game. So like Alliance War, it's still relatively roster restrictive, right? Because you're not exactly getting the new featured champions all the time. You're typically spending your money on other things, maybe the occasional cav deal here or there. But you still have a relatively versatile roster just from the natural, pulling more crystals. And the logic is still attacker centric for a pay to play player, but oftentimes like once people start spending even any amount of money on the game, I do start seeing like more, hey, I could do a defense rank up here. Like, hey, I'm relatively set. And the logic there is just like you have more access to resources and more access to champions that you're able to like make that sacrifice for the competitive rewards. And like, yeah, it's typically only in competitive players, people who are actively like Alliance War is like my favorite part of the game, or Alliance War is one of the best parts of the game, and they actively want to see higher rank in Alliance War. But just a little bit of money goes a long way here on defense rake up. As for Alliance Quest, I think Map 6 is a fairly accessible content for pay-to-play players, just because like roster diversity wise, it's much easier to manage. Yeah, you might need to talk to your officers here or there depending on if you get like a bad path or something, but you can probably rank up a champion and answer respectively. Map 7 is still going to draw some problems here from roster restrictions, mostly because like higher ranked champs for pay-to-play players are still challenging. Like getting to rank 3, not too hard, but getting to rank 4/rank 5, it still takes time, if you're not like hardcore whaling, it's not the easiest thing to do. But also Map 7, I think the biggest thing is donations, right? Like a pay-to-play player isn't exactly opening calves every week. So gold is sometimes a limitation, maybe not the biggest limitation, but is a limitation. Usually battle chips isn't, because a pay-to-play player who's pushing map 6/7 kind of necessitates arena grinding, and then loyalty is relatively fair as well. But gold is probably the biggest drawback there, even though a pay-to-play player can typically keep up a little bit better there. As far as like masteries though, I think a pay-to-play player, they're still relatively selective, but it's just inevitable that a pay-to-play player will have masteries unlocked faster than a free-to-play player. Like Kabam releases like an amazing mastery deal that just allows pay-to-play players, even a small like $20 or $30 a month at that's it. A pay-to-play player can unlock masteries way faster, and that's just an unfortunate reality. I'd like to see that get fixed, but that's where it is right now. And if you disagree, feel free to let me know, but that's my thoughts there. As far as prestige, even for a pay-to-play player, it's still difficult to keep up. Like there are definitely lulls or periods of times where I feel like pay-to-play players can keep up just off of buying the 6-stone deals, but eventually, you can't max sig all your champions, and the more often Kabam releases new champions with the highest prestige, you start getting outpaced. Like it's just not possible to keep up only spending $200 a month because your 6 stones have to be selective. You're often sigging up a specific champion at a time, and you're not really relying on awakenings to max sig your champion / dupes to max sig your champions. So like, yeah, you can keep up, you can do very great, but inevitably you're gonna fall behind a little bit. But as long as you're only looking to be in the top 500 alliances or so, a pay-to-play player can easily keep up in regards to prestige, at the small sacrifice of where you're dumping your 6 stones, unfortunately. But if that desire is there, it's definitely doable. Finally, as far as rosters, I feel like 4 stars for a pay-to-play player devalue fairly quickly. Essentially, once you've hit Cavalier, 4 stars lose almost all their value. Like, there's a niche rank up here or there, but honestly, pay-to-play players can typically just save their resources and rank up like champions specifically that are 5 stars and just hold out, slash like burn some units on some calves from their arena grind because they know they're going to get their resources not necessarily from content but from by deals here or there, and that's coming from a player who max ranks 4 stars still for content just for the giggles. But personally, 4 stars lost their value quite a while for me. I mean, it's almost essentially once I pushed Cavalier, 4 stars lost their value. I think I have 2 4 stars I ranked up after pushing Cavalier, and that was strictly because I was hard forcing content that I didn't need to force. But yeah, that's really just my perspective on that. But that's okay, because 5 stars, even for a pay-to-play player, like, we're still in the 5-star meta. 6 stars aren't quite there. Pay-to-play players are in this awkward stage of, like, we know the 6-star meta is looming behind us, but we don't know when it's going to trigger, because we're not spending enough money in the game to, like, have, like, 6 stars only in our roster, but we're spending enough money in the game that 6 stars are coming in, so it's definitely like a really weird place to be when you're spending some money on the game but not like a megaton. But it'll come eventually. The 6-star transition will come in, and then hopefully it'll trickle down to free-to-play players just as fast. It really just depends on Kabam. But that's my thoughts on the rosters. And then finally, pay to win. So let me be clear. I call it pay to win just to separate the categories. But I really don't feel like Marvel Contest of Champions really has a pay to win aspect. Like, the only like 2 competitive sources in the game are like Alliance Quest, getting those top rewards. And I don't see anything wrong with letting whales get the top rewards, because those top rewards, they're targeted towards whales. And then same with Alliance War. If you want to be in the top alliances, it's still possible. I mean, Brian Grant was in a top 3 alliance, and he's a free-to-play player. It's definitely hard, and you don't see as many free-to-play players, but it's doable. But pay to win, even in Alliance War, like, the rewards are good all the way down, all the way down to like Gold 1/Gold 2. I'd say the rewards are pretty good. Yeah, we're missing out on the Tier 5 class catalysts, but again, if you're a free-to-play player or even a pay-to-play player, Tier 5 class catalysts, they're not there yet. We're not in that 6-star transition yet, in my opinion. So, we don't necessarily want those rewards. And honestly, if you look at like the top tier, like the high-end Alliance War rewards, there are no Tier 2 alphas in that currently. And as a pay-to-play player, let me tell you right now, I'm like, nah, I want Tier 2 alpha in my Alliance War rewards. I don't even want to be in one of those high-end alliances, because I'm like, what am I going to do with the Tier 5 base? It's going to go into overflow. So yeah, just kind of a perspective there. But yeah, those are technically situations where you can pay to win in terms of like Alliance War. So on a pay to win account, you 100% almost always see defense-based rank ups, just because like it's accessible, it's doable, and they know they can get the resources elsewhere. Slash you're getting those rewards in Alliance War and Alliance Quest, and you want to have the most annoying, the most frustrating placements, the highest ranked you can, and you will definitely see defense-based rank ups in a play to win. You'll still see it in a pay to play, and you'll still see them in a free to play, but you'll see them much more frequently on a pay to win account. Alliance Quest Map 7 is still expensive, and a grind can still be necessary, but Map 7, it's surprisingly much easier to get donations in when you're opening cav crystals on a monthly basis, even on a weekly basis. Like, ISO sells for so much gold, and a lot of times just duping lots and lots of champions can get you the gold you need to put your donations in. You still have to grind for battle chips, like that's still a reality, but honestly, depending on how much money you're spending on the game, you might even see units just thrown in there in lieu of time. But typically, again, Arena is the great equalizer of the game, so I'd really like to see Arena pushed harder. As far as masteries go, a pay-to-win account 100% has every mastery unlocked. These, like, there's no reason not to. You just pick up a couple deals, you throw them in there, and you call it a day. And if they don't have them all unlocked, it's because they don't see the need to have it, / they haven't had a use for it. But there's zero reasons for a pay-to-win account to not have all the masteries unlocked. And if you're a pay-to-win player dropping like $200+ a month, I really, really implore you take like 100 of that dollars 1 month, and you just go and you unlock, a whole bunch of masteries, and you do that every month until they're all unlocked, because like it makes a huge difference when you're pushing specific content. After that, as far as prestige, pay-to-win players, these are the ones who are racing. That's essentially the pay-to-win aspect, right? It's prestige race. It's all about having the top highest end prestige, pushing map 7 to get the highest alliance quest rewards. It's all about having the best defenders to get, the most attack bonuses, the most defense bonuses in alliance war to win wars. And that's really, really what it's all about for a pay-to-win. But if that's all it is, honestly, that doesn't faze me in the slightest. And if you enjoy seeing number 1 or number 2 on your alliance for alliance war and getting those best rewards, getting the trophies, doing the legends runs, power to you. And I hope you enjoy the game because honestly, I love seeing it. I love seeing the legends run, even when I know it's someone just hardcore whaling and using unit man to push through. I love it. I love seeing the content. I love watching. I love seeing 100 crystals opened and 30 6-star crystals opened. Even though I know it's completely spent for, it's still really, really cool. And I hope that other people can take the same mentality, right? Like, not like, oh, I can't believe you spent so much money, but like, hey, that's really, really cool. And I think it's awesome that you can do that. I won't, but I think it's awesome that you can. After that, I think the final thing is roster. So for a pay-to-win account, rank ups are typically the top end of the list. Like, you don't usually see mid-tier rank ups, like the champions that don't have like strong defense value or don't have strong utility value. Like, there's no reason for a pay-to-win account that's opening calves, that's opening featured crystals on the regular to rank up a mid-tier champion that isn't going to see use. Like, if they have a niche utility or if they're for defense, then yeah, you see those rank ups, but you don't see any of the like mid-tier champions that are easily replaced by a high end. Because a pay-to-win player, you just wait until you get the answer. That's the reality. So yeah, that's my perspective on free-to-play, pay-to-play, and pay-to-win. Like I said, it's just my perspective, and that's varied based on everybody. I know this video was a long rant, but I really needed to get this out of my system because it's honestly been bumming me out. Like, I've been super bummed about like this whole free-to-play, pay-to-play, pay-to-win conversation that is circulating right now. I wanted to throw my opinion out there and see what other people think. Just because, like, I don't know. I think it's okay. In Marvel Contest of Champions, I recognize if you want to be the best of the best, keep up with that top end of the top end, you got to spend money. And honestly, you got to spend quite a bit of money. Yes, you can do it as free-to-play player. It's possible. Trust me, I'm there. I'm grinding. I'm trying. But, eventually the game is out to make money, and it's hard to keep up as a free-to-play player. I'm not a free-to-play player. And even as a pay-to-play player, it's tough to keep up. Like, I just can't reasonably or feasibly keep up with like a 6-star roster until 6 stars become regular for everybody. And then I'll be able to keep up all the way until rank 4 6 stars come out. But the honest reality is that pay-to-play players or pay-to-win players will always have an advantage over anyone spending less money than them. And I'm okay with that. I don't need Weapon X. I don't need Thanos or Kang in the Greater Gifting event. I don't need to have a rank 3 before anyone else. I'm fine waiting until my roster develops and then I push forward. From here, it's really just a matter of kabam. Like, my biggest pain points from like being pay to play to pay to win is that like I don't have Aegon. And even as someone who spends money on the game and has spent money on Cavalier crystals, because I consider myself somewhere in between pay to play and pay to win, because I've definitely had pay to win moments, but oftentimes I stick mostly to the pay to play location. Like, I still don't have an Aegon, which means like Abyss of Legends and Labyrinth of Legends have been a huge pain point for me. And I'm just sitting here like, well, what's the answer? And the answer is Aegon, which is total BS. So for me, it comes down to like kabam, recognize that you have these three perspectives in your game, because I know you recognize it. I know you're trying to balance the game for it. And please look at the points of the game where it's the most impactful. It's the most impactful in Alliance War, which I'm honestly relatively okay with, as long as they keep on stretching the rewards. What Kabam has been doing is they stretch the rewards out farther and farther. So more and more alliances can have better and better rewards. And like the rewards for being in the number 1 aren't as so massively huge compared to number 15. And the more they stretch out the rewards, the more fair Alliance War feels to both free to play and pay to win. And I'm okay with that. You know, keep the tier 5 class catalyst as the incentive for being in a top tier alliance, and make the tier 2 alpha and the tier 5 basic the incentive for the rest of the players. You know, and then we start looking at things like alliance quests. Like, it's about time, Kabam, you drop the donations on map 7, because like donations being a restriction for map 7 is already quote unquote the hardest map to run in Alliance Quest. It's supposed to be a difficulty thing, you know? It's supposed to be about difficulty, time investment, pre-planning, and like to an extent roster variation, so like proper rank ups in your roster to do so. And having donations be a restriction is ridiculous. Like, free to play players, they're not pulling the gold, they're not pulling, you know, they need their battle chips to get gold / get units. Like, just drop the donations, and then map 7 becomes way more easier. That's one of the biggest pain points between a pay-to-play and a free-to-play player, as far as Alliance Quest goes. You know, I understand the roster restriction, that's fine. Leave it for endgame players. But, you know, fix the donations. And then next up is Prestige. Prestige, like, we need a reliable, accessible source of 5-star 6 stones. I don't think they need to make 6-star 6 stones accessible. Keep that, again, for the pay-to-win players. But it's unreasonable to expect free-to-play players to continue playing this game when they can't push up to 10,000 prestige with 6 stones in the game. Like, right now, 5-star 6 stones are mostly only available in, you know, paid-for deals. And if they would just put, like, 30 extra 5-star 6 stones every single month in like the side event, and just make that a constant and stable reward every single side event, I think that's fine. And you might say, hey, that's a lot of 6 stones, right? We're already getting 10, that's 46 stones a month. But the thing is, as we push into the 6-star transition, we need access to those 5-star 6 stones. Otherwise, the gap between free-to-play players and pay-to-win players is going to get so big, people are going to start dropping out. People are already dropping out. So those are my biggest 3 pain points there. It's Alliance War, keep on shifting the rewards or stretching the rewards out. Alliance Quest, fix the donations because that's garbage. And Prestige, 6 stones. It's all about the 6 stones. So that said, I'll close out here. I got it all off my chest. Feel free to criticize, comment, throw away, blast away at me all you want, but keep it respectable, please. That said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.